What is up, guys? Today on the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, we're diving into rookie quarterbacks, doing a deep dive. One of my favorite shows of the season. We're getting into just the nuances of every single quarterback and going deep, deep, deep. Just get the algorithm. Deep quarterback dive. So we're going to start with Caleb Williams, quarterback out of USC, because Jeff will yell at me if I don't tell you where he played, since not everybody knows where he played. Right now, he is the 101 value in Superflex for most, in terms of most analysts out there for the most part. But what I do want to talk about before we get into we know where Caleb's going, the Bears. That's where he's going. Justin Fields just traded all of that. We have the landing spot for him. So really what I want to start with before we talk about his pros, his cons, and all of that stuff, he's going to the Bears. And I've been really diving into this season talking about, landing spot matters for these quarterbacks. We're going to get into the discussion once we get a little deeper into these guys. But generally speaking, before we get into the Bears landing spot for Caleb specifically, landing spot for you, Jeff, when you look at these quarterbacks, we're talking Drake Maye, Jayden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, maybe Michael Penix Jr. later. How important is it, and especially this year because some teams picking quarterbacks are not known for developing quarterbacks. So, how are you gauging, how are you kind of looking at these spots and really how big of a difference does that make in your rankings?
I think it's a significant factor when you look at everything involved, when you look at the Bears especially. And one of the reasons why I think the Bears are a solid landing spot for Caleb Williams is because that regime, that coach, that GM knows that they're not going to get another shot at another quarterback. And so they're going to pull out all the stops after the failure with Justin Fields to make sure Caleb Williams can succeed. And so I think that that's a great landing spot there. When I look at maybe some of the other ones, you've got first-time head coaches in New England, first-time GM in Denver or in Washington. And so you've got these different new regimes stepping in and their first time seeing things. And so those make me a little bit more leery, just because I think when you look traditionally at the quarterbacks that have excelled and been able to develop, I forget who it was. I saw somebody was really emphasizing the point. It might've even been Moving the Sticks was emphasizing the point of how valuable that kind of that off year, that rookie year has been traditionally in quarterback development. When you look at Patrick Mahomes, or you look like they went way back to Carson Palmer. And so you look at players like that were brought along slowly, that were brought along in situations where they could be developed, were given strong receiving options, were given coaches that knew what they were doing. And so that makes you nervous when you see quarterbacks stepping into teams that don't have that in place. And so that's the biggest thing. And that's, I think, a differentiator. When I do look at the Bears, they've obviously been aggressive to go out and add DeAndre Swift, to add Keenan Allen, to make sure that there are going to be options for Caleb Williams development, and that they've already failed once. And so I think they're going to be aggressive in making sure they don't fail again.
I saw your tweets before the show, Kevin, so I know this is in reference to a comment that I responded to one of your tweets. I think a lot of people are downplaying the Bears situation because of how they have historically been in the past with quarterbacks. When you look at what they put Justin Fields out there with, obviously you can have some hesitation, but going out to get Keenan Allen, like Jeff mentioned, they have the tools to go up and get a better offensive line or another weapon for Caleb Williams. I think you're looking at a really, really good situation. Now, in your tweet, you mentioned Minnesota. Minnesota is the second best landing spot to me. I think that's number 2 behind the Bears, simply because I think, you're looking at this rookie year. I think TJ Hawkinson's going to be not as available just based on when his injury was. I think you're looking at a Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison led attack. I do like the addition of Aaron Jones. We talked about that a lot last week. And I think the offensive line is sturdier for Minnesota than what some of these other places will be. But I also kind of look at that situation as, if you throw Jayden Daniels in there, I don't know that he succeeds. You have to have a specific type of quarterback. Whereas with the Bears, I think that they have set it up to where they can go any direction. They're going Caleb Williams, but they can go any direction based on the weapons that they put around him. So I think the depth of the weapons in Chicago is a lot better than what Minnesota has. But those two are the two where I'm loving whoever goes there. And I really hope we get Drake Maye, JJ McCarthy, one of those two in Minnesota, because then you're going to have two really good opportunities for two rookies.
For those of you who don't know, I kicked the Minnesota Vikings hive, and Christian got attacked today, and I left. I muted it, and I just
did
moved
too.
on. But when you're looking at Caleb, so let's say he goes 101. Let's talk about his pros and cons, and then we'll dive into landing spot. For each one of these guys, we're going to kind of talk about the landing spot anyway. But as a quarterback, so when you're looking at that, I want to give Christian the first dibs here because he did a lot of the quarterback work in our rookie guide that you can still download. 2.0 is out. What from your film-based analysis, everything that you've kind of looked at with Caleb, pros, what are some pros for him? What are some cons? And then we'll jump over to Jeff and see what he sees.
With Caleb, the number one thing that pops on the film is elite arm talent. He can make throws from outside of the pocket. He can make any throw at all three levels of the field. He's supremely accurate to all three levels of the field. He's got buttoned up mechanics. His release is really, really good. I think, when people start to talk about Caleb's cons, you start to say, well, he plays out of structure a lot. But when you go and look at the film, there is a lot of really good in structure work. A lot of what we talk about today is with the caveat that USC was a very bad football team with a very poorly designed offense. And Caleb Williams was out there playing hero ball. And some of that hero ball is really, really fun to watch. And I think it will work at the NFL level. But on the other side of things, that's definitely going to be mentioned in the cons for Caleb because we didn't see a lot of that in structure work and we didn't see everything that we needed to see from an elite generational prospect. I still think he's that because I think with a better situation, we would have seen those things. I've mentioned, I think he's the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck, and he might be better than Andrew Luck as far as fitting the modern day. But so I guess to that point, the pros are endless. You can talk about what Caleb Williams does well for a long, long time. Jeff, do you see it the same way?
I agree. I think one of the things that's interesting about Shane Waldron, when you look at his background with the Rams, with the Seahawks, a lot of what they have done is controlled passing game. He's worked with Jared Goff. He worked with later career Russell Wilson. So a controlled passing game that on first blush, you would think, well, that doesn't really mesh with Caleb Williams' strengths as a player who's able to create, able to keep plays alive, able to attack downfield vertically. But I think that as you want to develop and step Caleb Williams up into the NFL level, I think it's important to develop that short game, to develop him getting the ball out of his hands. And when I look at the receivers that they have available, DJ Moore can attack at all levels. DJ Moore is unquestionable. He can play anywhere on the field. I think Keenan Allen, when you're looking at this stage of Keenan Allen's career, he's going to be a little bit more of an intermediate to short target. And I think that fits well with Waldron's game. Maybe doesn't right now fit the strengths of Caleb Williams, but I think the development can be there in terms of he's a quick processor, and I don't have much concerns on him being able to do those types of things, especially working for a coach who was able to develop Jared Goff. And we know where Jared Goff started out as a rookie and where Shane Waldron worked with him earlier in his career.
And Shane Waldron looked good with Geno Smith. He turns Geno Smith serviceable, which is amazing thing. Let me tell you what, because I am not a Geno Smith guy, and he did turn him into he got him a second contract essentially, and he did that. And so I do think that landing spot for me, this is a really safe one. I think that it is safe. I think they have weapons, and they still have the number 9 pick too. So there's a lot of ways they can go with that number 9 pick. They might add another weapon. They might do those things. And I think when you're projecting out like who has the best landing spot, for a rookie quarterback in a long time, I think this is one of the best landing spots for a rookie quarterback in a very long time. Like this is something that they're doing. They did it the right way. Now they're building that rookie contract like they should have done with Fields, but that, that's for a conversation for another 10 days. But when you got diving into it, he is legitimately one of the best arm strength talents we've seen in a long time. And that's great. And I think that fits well with DJ Moore. Moore is going to eat in this offense. And I will say, based on that, that poll I put out, I think a lot of people are sleeping on this offense a little bit right now. And there's opportunity right now in Dynasty to go get DJ Moore, maybe Keenan Allen for cheap, maybe Cole Kmet if you want to go get a tight end maybe for cheaper in that way, especially in Waldron's offense. Like when you're looking at the tight end position, I do think they could utilize him. I know he lays the 3-headed monster stuff, but you could see red zone targets there, especially with a rookie quarterback. So I don't think it's out of the question where he's going. QB8 in terms of startups right now. That's pretty fair, I think, for Caleb Williams in that QB8 to 9 range. Now, really quick, based on we've kind of mentioned it, danced around it a little bit. Landing spot, for the Bears. If you go into the Bears here, what is your out of 10 confidence level for weapons? I put 7. Jeff, where are you at?
I put 8 for weapons. And I think what you make a great point in terms of one of the better landing spots for number 1 overall, because the Bears didn't earn number 1 overall. They got it from the Panthers. And if you look at the Bears and especially some of the football they played with Justin Fields outside of what they played with Tyson Bagent, they were right on the cusp of being a potential playoff team. And so I think that, and they didn't have to give up a massive package to go up and get that number 1 pick. So I think those are all factors that help to exactly like you put it, to create a great landing spot for number 1 overall.
Yeah, I put 9. I'm supremely confident in what this group is, and I don't think that they're done adding. I think that's critical. I do think they like Tyler Scott as a deep threat, and I think that he fits what Caleb's going to be able to do as well. So I think if he learns how to catch the ball this offseason, then they have kind of every flavor of wide receiver that you need in a Shane Waldron offense.
So when you look at coaching staff, I put 5. This is more about just I put coaching staff, but also in the back of my mind, it's like ownership. Bears haven't been able to develop kind of a quarterback. How does that look in terms of moving forward? I put 5 though because they're starting on the right pole. Ryan Poles seems like he's a very good general manager. It does seem like they're building. I like the Waldron pick there. Jeff's at 5 as well. Christian's a little higher though. I think he added Waldron here. Maybe I added Waldron. I don't remember. But why are you a little higher, Christian?
I just think when you match up what Shane Waldron did with Geno Smith with some of Caleb Williams' strengths, we go back to when we were debating whether it was going to be Justin Fields or Caleb Williams. A lot of people, and myself included, said, "Oh, yeah, they're definitely taking Caleb because they like to throw aggressive into tight windows. They like to work the middle of the field. Those are things that Caleb Williams does well. Shane Waldron's going to cook up a crazy nice offense, I think. I know some Seahawks fans are a little bit down on him because he abandons the run or he just stays inconsistent in the second half of games. But I think when you have a quarterback like Caleb Williams and that slew of weapons for him, I think it's pretty easy to coach pretty well. So I'm pretty confident in what Waldron's going to be able to do. The main question I have long-term is what happens if Waldron gets a head coaching gig? And then we're looking at a completely different situation.
You're good, because I was going to lead you there, because that was kind of my thought too.
Yeah.
If he has a really strong year this year, he's going to be a hot name for a head coaching job, given the way the league has run traditionally. And it's interesting as you line these first 3 teams up, they're all defensive head coaches on all 3 of these teams.
Yeah, and shout out Jason Wood. He works for Football Guys as well, long time OG as he calls himself. But he talks about this all the time. Is he'd rather hire an offensive-minded guy at the head coach position because you keep losing your offensive coordinators multiple times, and if that's the case, then it hurts your quarterback development. And since this is a quarterback episode, we are talking about quarterback development. I think that's a real thing that we kind of mentioned too as we dive into it. That's a problem. And now I had a nightmare right now listening to you guys talk about Shane Waldron being a head coach. You know where he's probably going to go? The Cowboys after they fire
Dallas.
McCarthy next year. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh God, I'm gonna lose my mind. All right, real quick. Offensive line right now projected for the Bears: Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Ryan Bates, Nate Davis, Darnell Wright. Could use that number 9 pick though there. I think it's incomplete. I put 5 because I think it's kind of in that incomplete era. Any really comments about that offensive line?
If Nate Davis returns to his form from Tennessee, I think this is a good offensive line. I think he was dealing with a lot last year. He missed camp quite a bit. There were some personal things going on in his life that caused some terrible play. I think he's the key because I think with this new center, you're upgrading at center either way because it couldn't get much worse. So with a slight upgrade at center, if you have your right guard playing to his potential, I think we're looking at a good offensive line that Caleb Williams can work behind.
All right, let's dive into it. We're going to talk about the next 3 quarterbacks on here on YouTube. If you listen to the podcast, we're going through a bunch more, but be sure to check out rookieguide.footballguys.com for our 2.0 that just came out. Christian's going to talk to you a little about Reddit.
Yeah, so Football Guys Fridays on Reddit, they're still going. Jagger May was on last Friday. Sigmund Bloom will be here on March 29th, and Matt Waldman will take over the channel on April 5th. This is the fantasy football subreddit, so just search fantasy football r/fantasy football. And every Friday, we've got a Football Guys analyst in there answering questions about free agency, the NFL draft. I'm sure it's going to be draft focused at this point. Any questions you have, it's a good time. Make sure you head over to Reddit for that.
All right, before you move on, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and so you never miss an episode. Comment below too. Let us know what you think. What are your ratings in terms of these landing spots for the weapons for the Bears as we kind of go through these teams? That's always fun. We love arguing with you about that and going through there. But we are going to talk about Drake Maye. So going to Drake Maye, and this is where it gets interesting because it really depends at that 102 value. Is it Jayden Daniels or Drake Maye? But we're gonna go into Drake Maye first. Before we get into like the landing spot, if he does go at the 102, it could be the Commanders. But before we go there, just because I don't know if necessarily they're gonna draft him there, Christian, what does the tape say about Drake Maye? What did you see when you were doing your dive in?
Oh, it's kind of a roller coaster because I think that when you look at Drake Maye, there's a ton of tools there that you can see the Justin Herbert comps, the Ben Roethlisberger comps, the young Ben Roethlisberger, to be clear. But there's also a lack of development from year to year. I think, one of the things that we talked about going into last year was he really needs to develop his footwork and his release. They were both kind of, I won't say inconsistent because they were consistently bad. His feet can get a little bit jittery. His arm makes up for it. And at the college level, I think that will pass. But at the NFL level, you need to be more buttoned up. I think that that's been clear that guys with mechanical issues don't always work out. That said, betting on Drake Maye to work those things out is something that I personally want to do because he's got elite arm strength. He can have really good placement at times. I think some of the footwork stuff throws that off, but when he's on and when he's sharp, he throws some of the best footballs in this class, right behind Caleb Williams. From an off-platform perspective, I think that he can create. I think a lot of people are going to look at his rushing stats and say, well, that's a dual threat guy. I don't personally think he's that. I think he can get you a couple 100 yards a year, which will be nice for fantasy, but it's not going to be your 700-800 like he put up in college. I do think that when he gets outside of the pocket, he can create, he can, generate a little bit more time where he can get a throw off. And like I said, the arm strength is really good. So just needs to button up those mechanics. But when we talk about the potential ceilings of these guys, I think Drake Maye is right behind Caleb Williams as a potential top 5, top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And so when we're talking about landing spot, I think he should be the pick for the Commanders. I don't know if he will be because they've got 27 people making that decision, but I think he should be that pick. He should be the number 2 quarterback.
I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but I think what you're going to see a similar situation with CJ Stroud last year, where leading up and even this part of the year, people started to say, oh, CJ Stroud's falling down the board, or Will Levis might be the pick for the Texans at number 2, whatever might happen there. And then the Texans get on the clock and they draft CJ Stroud and they basically say, yeah, we made this decision back in January. You guys all got bored and overthought things. And I think that's kind of that. Drake Maye has been the number 2 pick in this draft since week 18 ended. And that is my opinion of it. And despite the rise of Jayden Daniels and then now maybe the rise of JJ McCarthy, I think Maye is locked in there. I think that when you look at, you hit it exactly right, Christian. You talk about the tools. You talk about what an NFL team is looking for in their quarterback right now, that mobility to be able to create off platform, those types of things that Maye is able to do without sacrificing much of anything in the passing game, having that natural passing ability and being kind of that dual threat, maybe. I think you're exactly right there. You're not going to see too much of it, but functional mobility goes a long way in the way that NFL offenses are trying to design now, and especially RPO actions, those types of things. Maye's not going to be a statue back there, and he's not going to take you out of the ability to call those plays.
So I think both Maye and Daniels for Commanders, they fit Kingsbury's system. So when you look at that Kingsbury system, what he likes to do, like first off the cuff, when you look at Kingsbury, 90% of snaps are shotgun. Maye and Jayden Daniels can do both of that. They played over 90% in college and all of that. The air raid stuff, I think he's going to adapt it a little bit than what he did when he was in Arizona, because I don't think he did as good in terms of like that offense. It was a college level offense. And I think teams found out very quickly. But I mean, one could say that maybe Murray wasn't the perfect fit in that offense either. Like, with what he's trying to do, I do think when you're looking at the Commanders offense, I kind of like it. And it's weird because I hate the Commanders, but McLaurin's there, Jahan Dotson's there. When you're looking at kind of what they're going to be able to maybe add as well, I think that, when you're looking at mesh concepts, I think he was going to utilize a lot more of those. I was reading an article recently about Kingsbury and he's talking about more mesh concepts. the system does fit them. I mean, losing Samuel and stuff, that's going to hurt a little bit, but I do think they add weapons to that offense. And if it is Maye, like Christian's talking about, I think he should be the pick. I think that when you're looking at him, I think that, he has as a quarterback, more upside than Jayden Daniels. Now, from fantasy purposes, because of the rushing ability, yeah, Daniels, of course, I think always going to lean that way too. But I think that, like, even in the rookie guide, our ideal scheme fit was an air raid like offense. Well, here he is. He's got it. And they're going to build around him a little bit. And I don't think, like Jeff talked about with Waldron, I don't think Kingsbury's in line for another head coaching job right away. I think he's going to have to develop and see that. I could see him in a couple years seeing that. But right now, I don't mind this fit for him. I think that it is a good fit. As a quarterback perspective, he has all of those intangible stuff we talk about. My biggest thing with him is mechanics when he's under pressure. I think that to me is like the biggest like red flag to me is mechanics under pressure. But if they can protect him, but that's like any quarterback. I do think that kind of gets used a lot. But if they can protect him, get an offensive system built around him, I do like Maye in that instance there. But the mechanics just are red flags to me. But me and Christian talked about Drake Maye for years. For Debbie, we love Drake Maye. We talked about him like 2 or 3 years ago being one of those guys. I still think he deserves to be that number 2 pick in this draft. I think he can be. It's going to be interesting is where you draft him in your rookie drafts. Are you concerned, or do you like the Jayden Daniels upside from the rushing standpoint? But any final thoughts here, Christian, on Drake Maye, maybe the landing spot, Kingsbury, or anything like that?
You mentioned Kyler. I actually think that Maye sees the field better than Kyler did coming out. I think, like, especially pre-snap.
Well, he should. I mean, Kyler's like...
That's true. He's like a whole foot taller, I think, or close to it. No, but I think that the pre-snap identification stuff that we saw from him in college is going to translate really well. And that's going to just enhance what his progression will be. And I know a lot of people say, well, that's against college defenses, but if he's able to recognize blitzes, and one of the clips that I think went around quite a bit early on in this process was him moving himself out of the pocket because he knew he had a free rusher and he had to buy just an extra second of time. That stuff goes a long way. The mental processing part of Drake Maye is going to allow him to succeed. If you throw him in an air raid too, I think we could look at a very productive fantasy quarterback as well. And so I still think there's a debate there between Maye and Jayden Daniels.
I'm concerned about the line, to be blunt. They could not protect Sam Howell, and maybe a lot of that was on Sam Howell, but at the same time, I don't know that they have a plus piece on that line. And so that I think is a big concern. And so even if they were to hit it again in the draft multiple times, you're talking about developing young players. And that was, I think, one of the big, despite that defense being absolutely terrible last year, that offensive line did Sam Howell no favors at all. And so I think Sam Howell performed pretty admirably behind that. Now you're stepping into a brand new scheme as well. And so that's a concern of mine. I do think, I don't know if we want to go to this place now or if we want to go to this place later in the episode, but Kevin made an interesting point talking about how to value these quarterbacks. And I think one of the things that is worth mentioning, when you look at last year, you had Anthony Richardson, you had CJ Stroud, you had Bryce Young. We were all excited about them leading in for multiple years. Part of that is because 2022 was so bad at quarterback. This year, we got another strong quarterback draft. I think when you look forward to next year, to the 2025 draft, right now, I mean, maybe you can talk yourself into a Shedeur Sanders, or maybe Quinn Ewers gets there, maybe. But if you need a quarterback, then you probably need to grab one of these guys, and that probably is going to sway your decision when it comes to times where to value with these. Conversely, if you're set at quarterback, I think the two wide receivers sitting right there are very, very tempting relative to maybe where some of the safety ceiling of these other players might lie.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. I wanted to just double back to yours about the offensive line. They allowed 65 sacks last year, second most in the NFL. And it always worries about that. They have a glaring need at tackle. They got to go get a tackle. I don't know where that's going to be, if it's going to be in the draft or somehow. I mean, they're going to have to probably move up, possibly. I don't know what they're going to have to do in terms of that. I mean, Jeff's and Christian know more about the draft than I do. But when you're looking at that, I mean, there seems to be a very big I don't know what Tyler Guyton, in terms of what that value is, probably in the second round. He could be sitting there, possibly. That may be where they go. There's some other guys still out there. Donovan Smith, DJ Humphries, Mekhi Becton might be worth it if they miss and they're like, hey, maybe he can stay healthy. I don't know, but they definitely need to address that tackle position. And so that would be my biggest red flag with the Commanders. That's a good point. I think that is like, if they can't protect Maye or Daniels, whoever it is, whereas I think Daniels would be better fit there. I think he can maybe possibly work with a worse offensive line in Daniels. I think Daniels really needs to get protected. That is probably my biggest thing in the draft if they address that.
Yeah, there's a few options for them. They have those 2 early second round picks that they can use to move up if they need to, but there's also a couple tackles that I think could be sitting there at 36 where they're pretty comfortable slotting them in as starters next year, which I think whatever tackle they draft is probably going to start.
He better.
Where we're at. Yep.
He better. All right, let's go to Jayden Daniels. So looking at Jayden Daniels here, I mean, when you're looking at him, LSU quarterback, kind of came out of nowhere this year. He won the Heisman, obviously, but was at Arizona State, transferred LSU, kind of developed into that quarterback, 3,800 yards, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. When you're looking at him overall, like he was the former number 2 quarterback coming out of high school in 2019. Like he was one of those guys that people were falling all over. When Arizona State got him, they're like, well, we're back here. And it's his trajectory has been weird, to say the least, in terms of how he kind of did it. But he goes to the SEC, looked very good. He had Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. there this last year. When you're looking at him, I know he's looked really, really good. Deep ball accuracy. I look at big time throw percentage. You look at all of that from the deep ball perspective. Daniels improved that the most out of anybody else, I think, in this class. He improved that a lot. What do you see from Daniels, Christian?
I see an inconsistent passer still, and I know people won't love to hear that. And my thing with Daniels is when you turn on the all 22, you see wide open wide receivers running, and you don't know why you didn't throw it. And I think that it could be a coaching thing, and that's where it gets really difficult evaluating these quarterbacks. Is maybe he's not being told to get his eyes there, but there's also the scenario where maybe he didn't get his eyes there. And I think that's an important piece of this. The Athletic, I believe, had a really good article about how they're using like VR headsets to train quarterbacks on quick processing. And they tested it with Jayden Daniels, and LSU liked it so much that they brought it back and started giving it to him every week so he could visualize the defense. That seemed to help. You can see the progression throughout the year in terms of seeing the field. Now, as a dynamic athlete, he's got it. He runs like Lamar Jackson. He's got elite speed. I'm worried about his frame, to be quite frank, but when we start to put the whole picture together, yes, he was super productive. Yes, I think he can be supremely accurate. Yes, I think that there's a special player there, but I also think that sitting him down for a year might not be a bad idea. We talked about that already, but I think that he's less ready to play than all 3 of the other top 4, which I know hasn't been the national narrative. So feel free to cook me in the comments, folks.
Other than Minnesota, is there a landing spot where he's going to have better wide receivers than what he had at LSU? Because probably not. I mean, that's one of the things you're going to have maybe in some places a significant downgrade of receiving talent relative to what he was playing with at LSU, and they were playing quite often wide open games because that defense couldn't stop anybody. And so they a lot of things led into the numbers that he was able to accrue. Obviously talent was part of that. And his explosion speed in the open field is high level, but it's interesting to me and how, if he's really going to be like the second pick in this draft, like why did no team want Justin Fields? Cause I feel like you're making a similar bet with a similar age-ish player and similar skill set. And to me, if I wanted gonna draft Jayden Daniels, maybe I would go and trade for Justin Fields to be that quarterback that can play for the year while I develop Daniels and implement the system that I want to run, and then kind of double down and see if one of those guys are going to hit. But that's kind of one of the things interesting things that we saw from the past couple weeks in the NFL. But I think Jayden Daniels, certainly the athletic upside is very, very high. And we've seen players, especially rookies, able to quickly acclimate and excel in the league that have that ability. And so that's one of the biggest things that stands out to him. I think you make great points there in his development, in processing his development as a downfield quarterback.
I will say this, like, not to get in Daniels yet, we'll wrap it up with him. I don't want any piece of a quarterback that goes to the Patriots. I'm really concerned about that. And Alex Van Pelt is coming over there. I know Jared Mayo kind of hired outside, and I got some crap for it in the Discord because when they hired Mayo, I was not a fan. I was not a fan of this. I really wanted him to go outside the box, and I know it was in the contract, whatever. Then you get Van Pelt, and you know what? Van Pelt hasn't been great anywhere he's been, and he really struggled with Deshaun Watson and the Browns. And it seems like he's going to bring in the West Coast offense, I guess, kind of. I mean, the stuff with New England's really, it's hard to dive into like what is and what isn't, even with Belichick gone. But it does seem like West Coast. That doesn't fit Jayden Daniels, in my opinion. Jayden Daniels, he's an open air raid, kind of what we talked about with the Commanders. And that doesn't really fit Drake Maye either. I feel like Maye really needs that open concepts as well. So, like, to me, like, I don't want New England to draft a quarterback from a fantasy perspective. I don't love their weapons. You saw who they went out there and grabbed. I'm not a big fan of what they've done in free agency. They need offensive line help as well. I mean, I don't think that they're perfect either. They have a lot of holes. They earned this pick, right? As opposed to the Bears, who did not earn their pick at the 101. The Patriots did. This is why we all kind of believe maybe Brissett is their guy moving forward. Maybe they take a shot at a second or third round guy. Maybe they don't. But if Daniels or Drake Maye go to the New England Patriots, they go down my board just based on that offense, based on kind of the weapons that or lack thereof, the offensive line, all the needs there. Like, I think you're kind of looking at another Fields situation with that, right? Like kind of how the Bears were, and that's their situation when they did draft Fields. I'm not a big fan of the New England spot. Are you, Christian, or are you nervous like me?
No, I've maintained for a while that they are not set up for a rookie at this point. Especially, I mean, Trent Brown was bad for them, and he's not even there. So they got Mike Onwenu back, but I think this is the prime trade down spot, and then go get someone with pick 34. I think Bo Nix might still be there at 34, and that I'm interested in because if you can trade back, you can draft your left tackle of the future. You can draft a wide receiver potentially or some other offensive help for whoever the rookie is. And then you can sit whoever down behind Jacoby Brissett because he's a capable starter. That's a situation I like. But if they're just going to, take one at 3, I think they're in trouble. This is how you mess up. And I kind of think Washington's in a similar scenario. So it's kind of rough for these quarterbacks, but also you don't always pick here. So you have to take one sometimes.
I think the pick has to be Joe Alt, in my opinion. I think you take Alt, but that's just some random dude on Football Guys Dynasty show, not a GM. What do you think, Jeff?
I think you take Harrison, to be honest, and actually have a receiving talent for the first time since maybe Randy Moss was there. And that's the direction that I would go. But I hear you on Alt, but I think I'd be very tempted to Harrison. I would really be looking to trade down, though. And I think that a lot of talk has been around Arizona trading down and coming back up. I think when you look at several of these teams, when you look at the Patriots, when you look at Arizona, when you look at the Titans, you have Alt, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Malik Neighbors all right there. And I think that walking out with any of those, I would be thrilled. And I think that that's kind of, you're going to see some maneuvering there on teams trying to stay in position to get them.
Let me one final thought in terms of Jayden Daniels and how that looks, but also like just that offense. If he was to go to the Patriots right now, here's their weapons: Ramondre Steven, Antonio Gibson. Then you have Juju, Kendrick Bourne, KJ Osborne, Tyquan Thornton, Jalen Reagor, Kayshon Boutte somehow, Demario Douglas, who's probably the best weapon in that offense. That's their weapons right now. That's disgusting in terms of their running backs and wide receiver weapons. And I understand the tight ends a little bit better, but like to me, I'm avoiding that situation. I would not want either Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye to go to that, but I do like the upside of Jayden Daniels at quarterback.
Yeah. We ran out of time, folks. So I know you might have clicked into this video and said, I really can't wait for them to talk about JJ McCarthy. You know where you can find that? Over on the podcast. Search us up, the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, on your favorite podcast app. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Search us up. Make sure you come over. We're going to hit JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, every quarterback in this class. Like Kevin said at the beginning, this is a deep quarterback dive. Join us on the podcast. Make sure you subscribe when you do.